left for dead after the raid. He pulled her from the river, not knowing she was the chief's daughter. Best Wild West stories. The sun had just begun its slow climb over the horizon, spilling golden light across the quiet river. The water shimmered, reflecting the sky as though nothing in the world had changed. But Ethan knew better. The town he had called home was gone, burned, emptied, and quiet, except for the soft cries of birds and the rustling of the wind through the scattered trees. Ethan's legs ached, and his chest felt heavy. He walked slowly along the riverbank, his boots sinking slightly in the soft mud, each step leaving a fleeting mark that the flowing water quickly erased. The raid had left him shaken, more by the suddenness of it than by any injury. He had run for hours, hiding behind fallen logs and rocks, avoiding anyone or anything that might appear dangerous. Now all he wanted was a place to sit, to breathe, and to feel safe for even a few moments. The river's sound was soothing, a gentle roar in contrast to the chaos he had left behind. He stopped and leaned against a large boulder, letting his head fall back to look at the sky. Clouds drifted lazily, painted in shades of pink and orange by the morning light. For a moment he almost felt at peace. Then came the sound, a splash followed by a faint gurgling cry. Ethan's instincts kicked in. He didn't think. He ran toward the noise, his heart hammering. There, tangled in the river's shallow edge, was a person struggling against the current. A young woman, was being swept downstream. She looked small against the river's wide flow, her dark hair plastered to her face, clothes soaked and clinging. Without hesitation, Ethan kicked off his boots and waded into the cold water. The current tugged at him, but he kept moving forward. Reaching her, he grabbed her arm firmly and pulled. She coughed, sputtered, and gasped as he dragged her toward the shore. Mud and water coated both of them, and for a moment the world narrowed to only the sound of the river and the beating of his heart. Finally, they stumbled onto the riverbank. Ethan collapsed beside her, breathing hard, his hands pressed against the muddy ground to steady himself. The girl coughed again, sitting up slowly, her eyes wide and wary. She didn't speak. Ethan noticed she wore a simple but finely crafted necklace, beads that glinted in the morning sun. Her clothes were torn in places, not from any attack he could see, but from her tumble in the river. "You're safe now," Ethan said softly, trying to calm both her and himself. "Don't worry. You're okay." She stared at him for a long moment, her gaze steady and curious. Then, carefully, she pointed to herself, then to him, repeating the motion with a small smile that seemed almost like a question. Ethan," he said, hoping his name would make sense. "What's your name?" The girl shook her head. Then she touched her necklace again and pointed to the trees beyond the river. Ethan frowned. Clearly, she was trying to communicate something important. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small cloth, offering it to her. She took it hesitantly, using it to dab at her face. She nodded in thanks, then looked around. It seemed she was searching for something familiar. Ethan knew that she must have been swept away from somewhere upstream. The thought struck him sharply. What if she had been alone for a long time? How long had she been struggling in that river? He shivered despite the warmth of the sun. "Come on," he said gently. "You can rest at my place. You'll be safe there." She hesitated. Her eyes flicked toward the town's direction, then back to Ethan. Slowly, with a quiet trust forming in her gaze, she nodded and allowed him to help her stand. Together they walked along the riverbank. The morning was peaceful, almost serene, but Ethan's mind raced with questions. Who was she? Where had she come from? Why had the river taken her here? His cabin wasn't far, a small wooden structure on the outskirts of the old settlement. He opened the door and gestured for her to enter first. Inside it smelled of pine and wood smoke, familiar and comforting. He grabbed a towel from the shelf and handed it to her. She took it carefully, wrapping it around herself, eyes darting around the room as if seeing it for the first time. Ethan moved to the small stove and started a fire. The warmth spread quickly through the cabin, and the girl visibly relaxed, sitting down on a low chair near the window. She watched him, her gaze filled with curiosity and something else he couldn't quite name. Trust, maybe, or hope. "I'll get some water," Ethan said, filling a cup from the nearby basin. He handed it to her. She drank slowly, eyes never leaving his face. Then she smiled, small, shy, but genuine. Ethan couldn't help but smile back. After a few moments he asked, "Can you walk, or do you need to rest more?" She shook her head, then pointed outside, then to herself. Ethan realized she wanted to move, but carefully. He offered his arm and she took it, gripping him lightly. They stepped outside. The morning light was warmer now, spilling over the river, and birds sang in the trees. Ethan led her toward a shaded spot under a large oak. He motioned for her to sit. She complied, and Ethan sat across from her, watching her closely. There was something about her, the way she moved, the careful attention she gave to every small detail of her surroundings. She wasn't just scared or lost. She was observant, intelligent, aware. "You're strong," Ethan said quietly. "You made it through that river? That's not easy." The girl's lips curved into a small smile. She pointed to the river, then back to him as if acknowledging that he had helped her survive. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out a small carved pendant, holding it out to him. Ethan looked at it closely. It was beautifully made, with tiny symbols etched into the wood. "You, treasure," Ethan guessed. She nodded. Carefully, he handed it back. They sat in silence for a while, the gentle sound of the river filling the space between them. Ethan's mind wandered back to the town. Everything he had known had changed in a single day. But somehow, in saving this girl, he felt a new purpose forming. She was a mystery, yes, but she was also a chance to do something right after everything had gone wrong. "Do you have family?" he asked gently. The girl shook her head slowly, then pointed to the forest beyond the river, then to herself again. Ethan guessed that she was trying to tell him where she came from. "Don't worry," he said softly. "We'll figure it out. I'll help you get back home, wherever that is." Her eyes brightened slightly. She nodded, and for the first time since the river, she seemed at peace. As the sun rose higher, Ethan felt a strange hope rising within him. He didn't know her name. He didn't know her story, but he knew that together they could face whatever lay ahead. The river had brought them together, and maybe, just maybe, they could find a way to bring each other home. And for the first time in days, Ethan allowed himself to hope. The sun had climbed higher now, spilling warm light across Ethan's cabin. The river outside glistened, and the wind carried the soft scent of pine and wildflowers. The young woman he had rescued, the one he still didn't know by name, sat quietly on a wooden chair near the window. She was wrapped in a dry blanket, but her eyes kept darting outside as though she was waiting for something, or someone. Ethan moved quietly around the cabin, trying not to startle her. He had brought some water from the river earlier, and now he was busy preparing the small meal from dried beans and fresh bread he had stored away. He wasn't much of a cook, but he knew the simple act of sharing food could build trust. "Eat," he said gently, placing a small plate in front of her. "You need strength." The girl hesitated at first, then picked up a piece of bread. She broke it carefully, nibbling at the edges. Ethan watched her closely. She was cautious, observant, like a deer stepping lightly through the forest. But as she ate, her eyes met his, and a small smile appeared, a silent "thank you." After a while, she put the plate down and reached into her coat pocket. From it, she pulled a tiny bundle of beads. Ethan leaned closer, curious. The beads were intricate, arranged in patterns he didn't understand. She held them out to him. "What, these?" Ethan asked. She shook her head, then pointed to herself and then to the beads. Ethan realized she was trying to show him they were part of her, maybe something important from her home. He nodded slowly, understanding. "They're beautiful," he said, "very special." She smiled again and tucked the beads back into her pocket. Then, after a moment, she picked up a small stick and began drawing lines in the dirt floor near her chair. Ethan knelt beside her to watch. The lines formed shapes he didn't recognize, triangles, circles, and small dots connecting them. "Map?" he guessed. She nodded quickly. Ethan's eyes widened. Perhaps she was trying to show him where she came from. "You know the land," he said softly. She nodded again. Ethan felt a mixture of awe and relief. Not only had he rescued her from the river, but here was someone who understood the wilderness in ways he could only dream of. Her knowledge could help them both, and it made him even more determined to help her return home safely. The morning passed slowly. The two of them stayed inside the cabin, the young woman exploring cautiously while Ethan fixed some small repairs to the roof and walls. He noticed how careful she was, touching surfaces lightly, examining corners of the room, as if she was learning everything about this place. When she finally stepped outside, she walked to the edge of the riverbank and bent down to touch the water. Ethan watched from a distance, not wanting to intrude. She cupped the water in her hands, lifting it to her lips to drink. Then she turned to him and gestured, pointing along the river upstream. Ethan frowned, trying to understand.
"You want to go?" he asked.
She shook her head. "Not now," she said with a soft, almost inaudible sound. Then she pointed to the cabin and to him. Ethan smiled faintly. She wanted to stay, for now. They spent the afternoon exploring the area around the cabin. The girl moved lightly, stepping over rocks and fallen branches with ease. Ethan followed, carrying a small bag of supplies in case they needed it. She stopped at various points, pointing to berries on bushes, small patches of edible roots, and tracks of animals in the soft earth. "Food," Ethan said quietly, nodding. She nodded back. "You—" "Very clever," he said, impressed. As the sun began to lower in the sky, casting long shadows over the river, the girl led Ethan to a small grove of trees nearby. There, hidden among the roots, were simple shelters she had built. Ethan knelt down to examine them, amazed at their craftsmanship. Each one was carefully made to protect from wind and rain, cleverly camouflaged so that anyone walking nearby would not notice them. "You made these?" he asked, astonished. She nodded with pride. "For safety," Ethan added, realizing she had survived in the wilderness before the river incident. Her skills were remarkable. They returned to the cabin as the sky turned pink and orange with sunset. Ethan started a small fire outside and set a pot of water to boil for tea. The young woman sat near the fire, watching the flames dance. She didn't speak much, but Ethan felt her presence as a quiet reassurance. "Tomorrow," he said softly, "we'll start planning. We need to find out where you belong, who your people are." She looked at him, then pointed to the forest, then to herself. Ethan nodded. He understood. She wanted him to help her find her home, but she also wanted to do it carefully, without rushing into danger. As night fell, the stars emerged, sparkling brightly above the cabin. Ethan lay on his cot, listening to the sounds of the river and the wind through the trees. He thought about the girl, the mystery she carried, the skills she had, and the trust she had placed in him. In so many ways, this small encounter had changed his life. He had rescued her, yes, but she was rescuing something in him too, the hope that good things could still happen, even after the raid. During the night, Ethan woke once to see the girl sitting outside under the stars. She was tracing patterns in the dirt with a stick, lines and shapes he couldn't decipher. He watched quietly, not wanting to interrupt. Then she looked up at him and pointed to the stars, then to herself. He realized she was reading them, perhaps for direction, or maybe to tell a story. Ethan sat beside her, curious. "Do you use the stars to find home?" he asked. She nodded slowly. He realized that everything about her spoke of connection to the land, the river, and the sky above. She had a knowledge and wisdom he had never seen in anyone his age. The night grew colder, and Ethan finally coaxed her back inside. They shared a small blanket near the fire, the warmth comforting against the chill. They didn't need words. A quiet understanding had formed between them. Trust had been built not through talk, but through shared moments, rescue, shelter, food, and care. The next morning, sunlight poured through the windows, lighting up the cabin. Ethan and the girl stepped outside, ready to explore a little more. She led him to another small grove, pointing to edible plants and places where fresh water could be found. Each discovery was like a lesson in survival, and Ethan listened, learning from her quietly. "Tomorrow, we go further," she said softly, pointing upstream. Ethan nodded. He was ready to follow, to learn, and to help her find her way home. He didn't know the full story yet, who she really was, where she came from, but he was beginning to realize that this was no ordinary girl. She had skills, courage, and intelligence that rivaled his own, and for the first time since the raid, Ethan felt a spark of excitement. Not the excitement of adventure or danger, but the thrill of discovery, of teamwork, and of connection. Together, he thought, they could face whatever the world had left for them. As the sun climbed higher, Ethan and the girl sat by the river making plans. He didn't understand all the signs she drew in the dirt or the gestures she made, but he understood enough. They were partners now, navigating the river, the forest, and the mystery of her past together. Ethan glanced at her, smiling. She returned the smile, a small but genuine expression. And for the first time in days, Ethan felt something he hadn't felt since the raid. Hope. The river continued to flow, steady and constant, as if cheering them onward. The forest whispered secrets only those who listened could hear, and in the cabin, surrounded by the wilderness, two lives had collided, setting the stage for a journey that neither of them could yet imagine. Tomorrow, they would start walking. Tomorrow, answers would begin to appear. But for now, they simply sat together, learning from one another, building trust, and discovering the strength of human resilience and ingenuity. And that, Ethan thought as he watched the sun rise higher, was enough. The morning air was crisp and fresh. Sunlight filtered through the tall trees, casting dancing shadows on the forest floor. Ethan woke early, as he usually did, and looked outside his cabin. The girl was already awake, standing by the river, watching the water flow steadily downstream. Her dark hair glistened in the sunlight, and she held the small pendant she always carried. Ethan noticed how calm she seemed, as if she were part of the river and forest itself. "Good morning," Ethan said softly, stepping outside. She turned, giving him a small smile. She did not speak, but the smile felt warm and full of trust. Ethan gathered some supplies for the day, a small bag of food, a water pouch, and a few blankets.
"We should start moving," he said.
She nodded and began pointing toward the forest, then to herself, then back to the river. He understood. Today they would explore further, closer to the place she might call home. They walked together along the riverbank, carefully navigating over roots and rocks. The girl moved gracefully, confident in every step, while Ethan followed, learning from her movements. At one point she paused and bent down, pointing to a set of tracks in the mud. He knelt to look. "Animals?" he asked. She nodded, then gestured for him to follow. The tracks led to a small clearing where wild berries grew and a stream flowed quietly into the river. She pointed to the berries and then to Ethan, making it clear that these were edible and safe. He smiled. "You really know your land," he said. She only nodded, then motioned for him to walk slowly. They moved deeper into the forest. Ethan noticed that she was always aware of their surroundings, listening, watching, adjusting their path when needed. It was clear that she had survived here before, perhaps for longer than he could imagine. After some time, they reached a wide area filled with tall grasses. Ethan paused to catch his breath. He glanced at the girl, and for the first time, he really looked at her. She was small but strong, with sharp, intelligent eyes that seemed to notice everything. "You're brave," he said softly. She gave a faint smile but did not speak. Ethan realized that her bravery was not loud or bold. It was quiet, steady, and unshakable. As they continued walking, she suddenly stopped and pointed to a distant hill. Ethan squinted and saw a cluster of structures barely visible through the trees. She pointed again and then to herself, then back at the hill. Ethan understood. That must be her home, her village. "Your people live there?" he asked. She nodded. Ethan felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. He did not know how they would be received, but he trusted her judgment. The journey to the hill took the rest of the day. Along the way, the girl taught Ethan many small lessons. She showed him which plants were safe to eat, where to find fresh water, and how to move quietly through the forest. Ethan followed her carefully, learning quickly, grateful for her guidance. By late afternoon, they reached a stream that ran into the river. She knelt by the water, cupping it in her hands to drink. Ethan joined her, taking a moment to enjoy the cool, fresh taste. He noticed how skilled she was at surviving in the wilderness, even without tools or weapons. "You're amazing," he said quietly. She smiled again, the small expression speaking more than words ever could. After drinking, she gestured for them to move again. Ethan followed, and soon they reached the edge of the hill where her village was located. From this distance, Ethan could see people moving about, tending to small gardens and walking along paths. The village looked peaceful, harmonious with nature. The girl stopped and turned to him. She pointed to herself, then to him, then to the village. Ethan understood. She wanted him to come with her, but carefully. They approached slowly, taking hidden paths through trees and tall grass. As they drew closer, Ethan realized something surprising. Even though this was a small village, it had signs of careful planning and intelligence. Small bridges crossed streams, shelters were built with precision, and gardens were organized neatly. The people clearly valued knowledge and order. Finally, the girl led Ethan to a spot near the village center where a larger structure stood, a building made of sturdy wood, decorated with carvings and symbols. She pointed to it, then to herself. Ethan understood. That must be where her family or leaders lived. Before he could speak, she gestured for him to wait. She took a deep breath and stepped forward alone. Ethan watched as she approached the building. A group of people stepped outside, stopping her. Their expressions were serious, but she did not flinch. She spoke quickly, pointing at Ethan, then at herself, then gesturing toward the river. Ethan watched, heart pounding. The people whispered among themselves. Then, one of them, a tall man with kind but strong eyes, stepped forward. He looked at the girl, then at Ethan, studying them both. The girl gestured again, and the man nodded slowly. The man turned to Ethan. "You helped her?" he asked. Ethan nodded. The man's expression softened slightly. "You saved her life?" the man said. "That is honorable." Ethan felt relief wash over him. The tension in the air seemed to ease. The girl smiled at him, then pointed to the man. Ethan guessed this was her father, or perhaps the leader of the village. The man studied Ethan carefully, then nodded again. "You showed care, courage, and respect," he said. "Those are qualities we value." Ethan bowed slightly. "I only wanted to help," he said. The man gestured for Ethan to follow him into the larger building. Inside, the air was warm and filled with the smell of herbs and wood smoke. The walls were decorated with carvings, paintings, and symbols that seemed to tell stories. Ethan looked around in awe. "This is beautiful," he said quietly. The girl smiled at him again, proud of her home. The man sat down on a low bench, gesturing for Ethan to do the same. "You have shown great kindness," he said. "And she speaks highly of you." Ethan felt a flush of warmth at this. "She saved me," he said, thinking of the river. "I only helped her." The man nodded, understanding. "Kindness and courage often go together," he said. "You will find that those who respect the land and its people are always valued here." The girl looked at Ethan, eyes shining. She pointed to the pendant she wore, then to the man. Ethan understood. She was showing her father that he was the one who had saved her from the river. The man smiled. "Then we are grateful," he said. "You may stay tonight. Rest. Tomorrow we will talk more." Ethan felt a wave of relief. He had feared that he would be met with suspicion, or worse, but instead he was welcomed. The girl sat close to him, and for a moment the three of them shared quiet comfort. As evening fell, the village became peaceful. Lights glowed in small huts, and the air was filled with soft laughter and conversation. Ethan walked outside with the girl, looking at the river flowing nearby. He realized that this was more than just a home. It was a place where people lived in harmony with nature, using intelligence and care to thrive. Your people, very clever," he said softly. She nodded, smiling. Ethan felt proud to be in her presence, to witness the wisdom and knowledge of her culture. That night, Ethan slept in a small guest hut near the village, the sounds of the river and forest lulling him to rest. The girl slept nearby, her pendant safe in her pocket. He dreamed of the river, the forest, and the journey ahead. He knew that tomorrow would bring more discoveries, more lessons, and perhaps the chance to learn from her people. Ethan awoke with the first light of dawn. The girl was already up preparing for the day. She gestured for him to follow, pointing to the forest beyond the village. Ethan understood. They were not done exploring. As they walked together, he realized something important. This journey was not just about returning her home. It was about learning, growing, and discovering what humans could accomplish when they worked together, respected nature, and shared knowledge. The girl turned to him and smiled. Though no words were spoken, Ethan felt her trust and friendship. He smiled back, ready for whatever the day would bring. Today, he thought, they would take another step in their adventure, and with her by his side, he knew they could face anything together.